Hi everybody, thank you for taking your time today to visit with me. I am Heather Gudenkauf, a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of The Way to Silence, These Things Hidden, and One Breath Away. Today we're going to take some time to talk about my newest novel, One Breath Away. I'll answer any questions that you have, and we'll also be giving away 10 copies of One Breath Away to 10 lucky winners. We can go ahead and get started with any questions people might have. Okay, Lit Girl asks, how does working in education influence your writing, if at all? I have been in education for the last 20 years, and so most definitely it impacts my writing. I tend to write stories about families in crisis and often with children involved, and I do think that while all my stories are fictional and not based on anything specific from my role in education, but definitely inspires the writing that I do. Bookworm asks, hi Heather, what does it feel like the week before your book comes out? Well, it's always very exciting. It's a very special time when after all the many months and even years of writing or working on a project, everybody working really hard to get it to publication, to know that it's going to be out there into the world. So it's always a lot of fun. Cam asks, do you have a set writing routine, or do you simply write when you feel compelled? Thanks. I really do try to have a set writing routine. I try to write every day, but what that routine looks like is different. I'm a mother. I have 3 children. I'm married, and I also work outside the home. So whenever I can write, I take those opportunities. I always try to find a somewhat secluded spot in our house. I always say I always go wherever my family is not in the house. I always like to listen to something music while I'm writing, but I can write just about anywhere if I have a pen and paper or my laptop with me. Jerry asks, what made you decide to write the book from multiple points of view? I enjoyed that style of writing, by the way. Thank you. I enjoy reading books written from multiple points of view, and I really love writing in that manner. There's just something about getting into the different characters' heads and writing about the way they feel, the way they think. It's like stepping into another person every day when I'm working on a project. And for example, with my newest novel, One Breath Away, it's the story of a very terrible day for one small fictional Iowa community by the name of Broken Branch. And the town's elementary school is broken into by an intruder with a gun who takes the classroom hostage. And I told that story through 5 different points of view, including a 3rd grade teacher nearing retirement, also a 13-year-old girl who's trying to find out what's happened to her younger brother who's in the school, from the point of view of Meg Barrett, who is a police officer in the small town of Broken Branch, as well as Will, who is the grandfather of Augie, the 13-year-old, and Holly, who is Augie's mother, who's thousands of miles away. So there's a lot of characters in the story. It's all told from their point of view within about 6 hours of this horrible day. And I just really like to get into the different characters' minds in order to tell the stories. Bookworm asks, what happens if you have writer's block? And do you have a go-to writer's blockbuster? What I do when I get stuck, I tend to take a break. I'll go for a walk or take my dog Maxine for a walk, and that tends to help. I also, whenever I get really stuck on a project, I go back to pen and paper. I'll get out my notebook and my pen, and then I'll start writing longhand. That really seems to help me out quite a bit when I'm writing. And I tend to, if I get stuck, I can go to that and things seem to get flowing again. Shelley Mead asks, do any of your children read your books? And Yes, Shelley, some of my children read my books. My middle daughter has read all of my novels, my 15-year-old, and she was even an early reader for One Breath Away before I submitted it, and gave me lots of good insights and suggestions for the book. I don't necessarily recommend my books for very young readers because of some of the tough family situations, but some high school kids tend to enjoy my books as well. A Word with Kate asks, what can we expect from you next? Well, I am currently working on my next novel. I always hesitate to say a whole lot about the books that I'm working on, the projects, because things tend to change. But I can tell you it's also involves very strong characters who are ordinary people placed in extraordinary, difficult situations, and it's told from the point of view of a very good woman who makes a bad mistake, and also from the point of view of a young girl who comes into this woman's life and how this one mistake impacts so many people. Savvy Bookworm asks, who were the people in your life that really inspired you to pursue writing? Well, I've had lots of great support from my family. My mom and dad and my brothers and sisters have always been very supportive. My mom and dad have always told me, just follow your dreams, do what your heart tells you to do. So I've always felt like that I could at least try. Whether I would make it or not, no worries. I just knew that they would be there for me to support me. My husband and my kids, of course, are very, very supportive of my writing as well. So I have a great support system around me, people who encourage me to do what I love doing. Book Crazy Woman asks, you must realize how eerily timely your new book is with what's happened in Colorado. What was your inspiration for this book, and what were you hoping to accomplish with it? Yes, just like everybody else around the world, when I woke up in the morning and saw the news about Aurora, Colorado, I was devastated. News like that never gets easier. It's always shocking. And my experience, or what brought me to write One Breath Away, back when I was in college at the University of Iowa, I was a student, a senior at the university, and I was down on campus at the time, and there was a bunch of sirens, police sirens, and there were ambulance sirens, and my roommate and I were wondering what was happening. And we found out very quickly that there was a gunman on campus who had opened fire, killing 5 and injuring terribly a 6th person. It was a disgruntled former graduate student in one of the programs at the school. And fortunately, we were well away from the danger, but it was a very scary time for everybody on campus, and our hearts went out to the family members and the friends of the victims, and that situation has always stuck with me, and I knew that one day this would creep into my writing, and it certainly has. Mike Malley asks, was this book inspired by the Columbine shooting? This book wasn't specifically, as I just mentioned, inspired by Columbine, but as an educator, as somebody who has been in education for 20 years, I've been able to see the change in education and the approach to school safety through the years. When I started out, there were really no locks on the school doors, and windows were open, and people could come and go, and that was, a really wonderful time. And however, incidents that have happened in the last 20 years really made people think about what we need to do to keep schools safe. And so In researching the book, of course, I have my education background as a teacher and the teacher perspective with lockdown situations, but I also got a chance to research and visit with law enforcement for their perspective on the different lockdowns. So I did do research based on what happened at Columbine and other terrible situations such as that. And I really learned that communities, school districts, police, and other services, community services, are really focused on keeping kids safe. And that was a real comfort to me as a mom. Jagged Otter asks, how much are you inspired by news and the headlines? And I'm very much inspired by news and the headlines. I read newspapers whenever I can get my hands on them. I listen to a lot of talk radio. My second novel, These Things Hidden, was based on a news story that I heard on National Public Radio about safe haven laws, and in that book I explored what happens when a baby is left at an Iowa safe haven site, and the 4 women who come to love him. So I'm always looking in the newspaper, always listening to the news, and one little nugget of information can really start a story in motion for me. Audrey L. Curley asks, what advice would you give to a new author just starting out? And the best advice I can give is to write. Put your your thoughts down on paper. Write the story that you know that you want to write. Write it completely, the best that you can, and then start working on the business of writing, of following your dreams that way. And if you're persistent, if you don't give up, if you work hard at it every day, it will happen. And I also think it's really important to be a reader of all different kinds of books and genres. Read anything and everything you can get your hands on, and that will also help you as a writer. Bookworm asks, what was your favorite book as a child, and who was your favorite heroine? Oh, I have so many favorite books from childhood, but absolutely loved the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. I would read those from cover to cover, over and over, until they fell apart. And used to play Little House on the Prairie in our backyard with my sister and my friends, and I still will pick up the Little House books once in a while and reread those. I just loved everything about Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I thought that I would be a great pioneer girl until I figured out they didn't have air conditioning or Diet Coke or chocolate. So I don't think I would do very well, but I do love those books to this day. And as my favorite heroine, also Laura. I just think it brought me into a whole new world, being able to read those books and learn about a different place and different time. Consuelo Carpenter asks, do you use people you know as inspirations? My books are fictional, and my characters are fictional. I imagine that, as with most writers, some of the people you meet along the way in your journey through life might creep into a story or a novel. For example, Mrs. Oliver, the 3rd grade teacher in One Breath Away, is probably just a conglomeration of all the best teachers that I've ever had growing up, and she's one of my favorite characters that I've ever written. I just love her feistiness. I love the way that she loves her children, but she's no nonsense and will do anything to protect her students. So I think she's a fabulous character, and I think she really shows the best of what's out there in education as teachers. Bookworm asks, do you carry around reading material with you? A book, Kindle, magazines? I don't go anywhere without a book. I have books stashed in my car. I have my iPad with my Kindle app on there. I have books stacked all around my house, and so absolutely I feel lost and naked without a book or some reading material. on hand just in case. So I read whenever I can get the opportunity to do so. And Mackenzie M asks, do any of your children enjoy writing? You know, they do. I think all three of my children are great writers. Whether or not that's something they'll pursue in the future, I don't know. But I would certainly encourage them and support them in doing that. I think my kids are talented in lots of ways, and writing is no exception. Mike Malley asks, you mentioned you listen to music when you write. What kind of music do you listen to? I listen to just about anything. I kind of low-key when I'm writing. Right now, I love Mumford & Sons. I think they're fabulous. I listen to a lot of Nora Jones. But yeah, and whatever my kids have downloaded on the computer, whatever pops up, sometimes that's what I end up listening to also. But yeah, I like to have a little background noise while I'm working. Margie Takala asks, do your friends ever find themselves in your books? Not that they've said to me, no. Like I said, my novels are fictional. However, I'm sure that some of the characters from the people around me end up inside my books. And yeah, so not intentionally. I don't include anybody that I know. Oh, Leslie Kagan. Hi, Leslie. She asks, hi, Heather. I've never written a multiple point of view story. How do you approach it? Well, I approach it I've done it a couple different ways. My first book, The Way to Silence, I just started writing, and one day I would be the character of Callie. The story's about two little girls who disappear into the woods. I write from the point of view of Callie, one of the little girls, and the next day I might be Martin Gregory, the 60-year-old college professor, and so back and forth I would go with each of the characters, and it was great. I loved doing it that way, but I tried to get more organized for my next two books, where I would write one character all the way through their story, and then I would come back and write the next character's point of view all the way through as far as I could with the story. I think that was a better approach for me, because then I was able to really keep the voices of the characters distinct from each other, as well as the tone that they would, that I would write in would be a little bit different, or the pacing that I would write, giving separate, distinct characteristics to each of the voices. Passion for fiction. Oh gosh, out of all three of your books, which book was your favorite to write and why? That's like asking me which is my favorite child. That's so hard to do. I can't say that I love a book more than the other, but I can say that why I love each book differently. The first book, The Way to Silence, I think I loved because it was my first. It was all new and wondrous, the whole writing thing, and through it I got to meet so many wonderful people in regard to the publishing world, which was brand new for this Iowa girl, and also just the fact that a dream of mine was coming true. So that for me the first book will be always very special. The second one, These Things Hidden, is very special for me too, because it was written during a very difficult time. I had a family member who was ill, and once again the people came through for that. At times I didn't know if I would ever get the book done, finished, let alone published, and I was so wonderfully supported by my publisher, my writing friends, my author friends, and my community, that for me that was, the second novel was a group effort in many ways to get that completed. So that one is very special. And for One Breath Away, that's very special to me because I was able to write about education, which is a passion for me, and to write as who I want to be when I grow up, who is Mrs. Oliver, the teacher who's nearing retirement. So that's why that book is very special. to me. Okay, Edie Motley Walworth asks, which of your books would you recommend for a book club and why? I think they would all be great for book clubs. There's lots of great discussion points for each of the books. They all talk about ordinary people put in very difficult situations. I also really explore motherhood in all the books, in motherhood in its different forms and what it means to be a parent. And I think that really lends itself to discussions. And One Breath Away, just with what's going on in the world and the conversation about gun safety and keeping our children safe, I think there could be lots of great conversations around that as well. Savvy Bookworm asks, when you were a child, did you picture yourself becoming a writer? Not when I was a child. When I was little, I always thought I would be a teacher. I knew that since I was probably in kindergarten that I wanted to be a teacher. And it wasn't until really I was married and had my 3 children that I seriously thought I wanted to give it a try. And day after day as a classroom teacher, I would tell my students to follow their dreams, dream big, never give up. And I realized that I needed to do that for myself as well. And so that's when I really thought it was important for me to sit down and try my hand at writing. Passion for Fiction asks, what is your favorite part about being a New York Times bestselling author? Also, out of the 3 of your books, which book would you like to see portrayed on screen and why? Okay, well, the first part of that, my favorite part about being a New York Times bestseller is just my connection with readers and just having the opportunity to talk with people who love books as much as I do. And that's really been thrilling for me. And of course, to have that tagline, next to your books or on top of your books is just a thrill as well. But really, it's what I've learned is that publishing is about the people, writing is about the people. Writing is very solitary in itself, but it takes such a large amount of great, committed people to make books come alive for others. And the second part of that question, out of 3 of your books, which book would you like to see portrayed on screen and why? I think it would be fabulous to see any one of them on screen, and I think that would be a lot of fun. I think each could be dramatized in its own way, and yeah, if that happened, I would be thrilled. Mackenzie M. asks, what made you decide to set this book in a small town as opposed to a big city? Do you think the event made more of an impact in a tight-knit community? That's a great question. Why would I set One Breath Away, which is the story of an intruder in a very small town school, and the impact it had on the townspeople? I think, exactly for that reason. In my experience, small towns are very tight-knit. People are always looking out for each other, always willing to lend a hand. Oftentimes, a lot of people in the community are related to one another, have grown up with each other. And I also think by setting One Breath Away in a small community that's rural, the fact that there was this early spring snowstorm made help and that much more difficult in arriving to the small town of Broken Branch. So they were much more isolated. So, and with a small community such as Broken Branch in the book is very small and it doesn't have the same resources that a large city might have. Leslie asks, which writers do you admire most? And that is a really hard question too. There's so many authors I just adore. It's hard for me to name them all, but I'm a huge fan of Sandra Dallas, Louise Erdrich, Ann Patchett. I love T.C. Boyle. There's so many, and there's never enough time to read all the books that I'd like to get my hands on. Beach Bum reads, hi Heather, do you have any advice for aspiring writers? And I think, the most important thing about being a writer is to write. Write the books that or stories or poems that you would like to read, that you're interested in spending your time with. So if you're passionate and love what you're writing about, other people will too. And to really make that commitment to write every day. I think for a lot of people, the idea of writing a whole novel is very daunting. But if you just write a little bit every day, you can really very quickly see the results of that. G. Cotto asks, where do you do your writing? Do you have a certain room in your house or area where you get your best ideas? Well, the joke in our house is I go where everybody else isn't. I don't have a set writing room. I go where the family is not. So I'll take my laptop or my notebook and hide out in my room, and if somebody comes in, then I'll go to their room, and just wherever I can get a little bit of solitude to do my writing, I will. And where do I get my best ideas? I think my best ideas come to me when I am doing something else besides sitting in front of the computer screen trying to write. I get a lot of my ideas while I'm either hiking or running, or when I get a chance to do something that very relaxing for me, which it would be hiking and walking. So those were outside. If I can get out into nature, I feel like I can get some ideas going. Passion for Fiction asks, if you could be on any talk show to discuss your work, which talk show would you love to talk with? Wow, that's a hard one. Well, Oprah would be great, but she doesn't have her traditional show as she used to. I would love to visit with Oprah. I also like Kelly Ripa live. I think she's hilarious. I would love to visit with her. I know she loves to read. Loves books. I would love to talk books with Kelly Ripa. I think that'd be great. Cam asks, do you read ebooks? If so, how is it better or worse than reading conventional books? Well, I was one of those people who swore that she would never, ever, ever get an e-reader. And of course now I have an e-reader. And I like them for different reasons. The e-reader is very nice when I'm on the go, or it's the middle of the night and I need something desperately to read. But there's nothing I like more than having my hands on just a real book. I love buying books. I love lending out books to friends and family. I love to see my books on my bookshelves and stacked around my house. I prefer the pages and the covers in that sense, but I do enjoy my e-reader as well. I tend to do a lot of more nonfiction reading on my e-reader. I also get some cookbooks on my e-reader in hopes that I'll start cooking more. But I think they both have their place. And Rosemary asks, hi Heather, your book cover is so eye-catching and draws attention. Was the girl's picture pulled from your own childhood picture? The eyes are so similar. I love the book cover too. When I first saw, all my book covers, but when I first saw One Breath Away, I just thought, perfect. The art department, whoever put that together, nailed it. And no, it's not of me. The art department from Mira, UK, I believe, put that together and did a fabulous job of capturing in just that one little girl's face the mood and the suspense and the mystery surrounding the story. So yes, love the book cover. Jagged Otter asks, are you a pantser, making it up as you go along, or a plotter when it comes to developing your novels? I'd like to think I'm a plotter because I have my trusty notebook. I've got one right here that I use to organize all the characters, and each character has a special tab, and I write everything down about that character. But then once I start writing, it seems like everything changes, but I can always go back to my notebook and my plot line that I have organized in order to keep me on track. So I guess I'm a little bit of both. Word with Kate asks, how do you find time to write novels in your busy schedule? You know, it's just something I love doing. I'm so fortunate that I get to do the things I love. I'm a mom and a wife, and which is of course always the most important thing, which is family. I'm an educator, working with reading programs for children in higher poverty areas, and I get to write also and follow that dream of mine. It's definitely a balancing act, knowing which part of my life needs to take precedence at any given time. But you know, I look at writing as really a treat for me, and I make time for it. So I try to write a little bit every day, or at least do something with my books every single day. Mackenzie M. asks, if you were one of the teachers at the school in One Breath Away, would you have reacted similarly, or would you have done things different in that type of situation? I am the biggest rule follower probably in the world, so I would do whatever the handbook of the school tells me to do. I don't think I would like to think I was as brave and sassy and feisty as Mrs. Oliver in the way she stood up to the gunman in the story, but I don't know, because I do follow procedures and guidelines like the good teacher is supposed to do. But you know, I would certainly hope that I would be right there putting my life on the line with for the children who were in my care. Leslie asks, is there another genre that you secretly aspire to write? I would love to write historical fiction. I love reading about history. I love getting carried away to different places and times. So yeah, I think someday I would love to write historical fiction and some big epic sweeping novel about pioneer women or something. I think that would be fabulous. Bookworm asks, what kind of research do you do? I definitely have to do some research with the novels. For One Breath Away, I met with local law enforcement who sat down with me, and they were able to talk me through what would happen during a lockdown situation or a hostage situation, and really gave me some insights into that we as community members or teachers or parents wouldn't realize goes into, needs to be thought about or thought through. One of the examples for that is the use of cell phones. We know that just about every child, in schools carry cell phones or have access to them, and how as a parent that would be, we want to be able to have contact with our children, and that's an important thing. And especially in a situation like that, we'd like to have contact with our children. But from a law enforcement perspective, the use of cell phones can really cause a lot of chaos in hostage lockdown situations, with maybe misinformation or wrong information being shared. So it's a real balance between that. So that was really interesting for me to learn about as I researched One Breath Away. I also had the opportunity to go ahead and visit some cattle farms while I was working on One Breath Away. Will, the grandfather in the story, is an old cattle farmer, and I knew nothing about farms or cattle, and two farmers from southern Iowa were kind enough to open up their homes and their farms to me and take me around and teach me the ins and outs of what it would mean to be a cattle farmer. So that was great. So yeah, I really enjoy the research part of writing. I love learning new things, and I love being able to use those newly learned items in my books. Savvy Bookworm asks, what challenges did you face in writing the end of the book and wrapping everything up? Well, that's one challenge I think for every writer, is to know. How do you know when you're done? when do you know that you're finished and you've said everything that you need to be able to say? And you've said everything you needed to say in a book. Um, so that's why, for me, having early readers is really important for me. I always print out, before I turn in my book, I print out some copies and give them to some trusted family members, including my daughters, or my mom and my sisters and some other folks. And they really give honest, great insights into the book. So if the reader, my early readers, think I found a good closing spot, then I feel confident that I have. Lit Girl asks, what is your favorite part of the book writing experience? Getting started, writing the last chapter, seeing it in bookstores? Oh gosh, every phase of the writing process, has its own great pieces. I love getting into the minds of the characters. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. It's so great for me, I feel like, when I'm able to, start building a character, finding out what their hopes and dreams are and jotting those down and taking notes on what I think the character might look like, or how many brothers and sisters she has, or the pet she had when she was growing up, things that might not actually even end up in a book, but go into how I build a character. And I really enjoy creating the characters, and it gets to a point where they seem almost like your friends, and you're just as you're in a good spot in your writing when you're just as invested in what happens to your characters, and the book goes one direction and something bad happens, you feel terrible. So I love developing the characters in my writing. Beach Bum Reads asks, when did you first consider yourself a writer? Oh, that's a good question. I think, as an educator, what I've taught my students is that if you write anything, you're a writer. And you don't have to be published. You just have to know what your thoughts are and get them down on paper, and be willing to share your work, or if you even use it just for your own purposes in a journal. That's what makes a writer. And so I've always known I've liked to write, and have enjoyed that. When did I really think of myself maybe as an author? Would be a published author is when I saw the books in the bookstore, and that was really thrilling for me. I remember my mom and my sisters came to town, and we did a tour of the bookstores and snapped pictures, and it was just a great feeling. Margie Tekla asks, do you have any hobbies you enjoy when you're not writing or reading? I do. I try to run. I'm not fast, and I'm not very good, but I really enjoy running and walking, going on hikes, spending time with my family. Really enjoy that. I tried to do a little gardening this summer, and what I mean by gardening is buying plants at the store, but with the heat and the drought, I just really have a hard time keeping the plants alive. So yeah, just spending time with family is really important to me, and getting out into nature and walking and exercising. Passion for Fiction asks, if you could write about any ethical challenging topic in today's world, what would it be and why? That's a really good question. Something that I think, a topic that I think is very interesting, and with having family members who've battled or are battling cancer, I just think the items in the news about a shortage of cancer drugs, where people who are in need of certain cancer fighting drugs can't get their hands on them, and not because they don't have the materials to make it. It just isn't making money for some of the pharmaceutical companies. I think that is a huge ethical dilemma when we can't get the medication to to the people who really need it. I think that would be a really interesting topic to write about. Beach Bum Reads asks, how do you go about choosing the names for your characters? And what I do, I think choosing character names is really tough, very tough. And I spend way too much time trying to find names for characters, and it's tough in some ways because as a teacher, as an educator, I've taught just about somebody named just about every name possible. And if you have a character who's less than savory and not very nice, I certainly don't want to name that character after a former student of mine. So that's tricky. But I often get baby name books from the library because sometimes I like to look at the meaning behind names. There's also a great website called Fake Name Generator that you can go to their website and it comes up with all these fake names. So, that will give me ideas once in a while too. But yeah, it's just like naming a baby. You've got to find the right name to fit the character. Rosemary Sim asks, when you do book tours, do you ever veer off to smaller towns? My town always gets bypassed for the larger cities. I've been pretty much spending my time in Iowa promoting One Breath Away, and I've got to go to a lot of really great small Iowa towns to their libraries. Independence, Iowa, I got to go to, and Jessup, Iowa, just the other day. I love small towns. The people there are great. They're small but mighty, always very welcoming. And it's unfortunate when authors can't get to town, some of the smaller towns, due to scheduling challenges or other things, but it's always worthwhile to be able to get to the smaller towns and meet the great people there. A Word with Kate asks, what is your favorite food? Do you like to cook for your family? I loved so many kinds of food. That's a hard one. I love Mexican food. I love going out to eat. And that probably answers your second question. Do you like to cook for your family? I wish I loved to cook. I'm not very good at it. It's not one of my talents. But there's nothing better than sitting down with your family for a home cooked meal, and that's always a goal of mine. Sometimes it ends up just being something very simple. With working and kids and writing, I don't get to cook as much as I like to, but I do love baking. I love baking cookies. That's probably my favorite thing to do. And I have a great peanut butter cookie recipe that's been passed down through the generations that I like to pull out once in a while. Bookworm asks, do you think you'd ever publish any mini ebooks between novels, like Tess Gerritsen's recent John Doe or Lee Child's Deep Down? I've never thought of that, and I think that's a great idea for people who that's in between books. I know that I'm always looking for my favorite author's newest books, and that would be a great way to tide me over while I was waiting for the next one. I haven't given a lot of thought to that, but that is a great idea. Thank you. Diane Mendez asks, out of the 3 of your novels, which book cover was the most attractive to you? Which one do you believe captured the essence of the novel the best? That's another tough one. I love all 3 of the covers, and in fact, seeing the different foreign editions of the novel, sometimes there's different covers as well. I gotta say, for the first one, The Way to Silence, it being my first book cover, I really thought they did an amazing job with the little girl standing in her little pink nightgown holding the necklace with the musical note on it. Was perfect. It just had that sense of mystery, but knew that there was some innocence there. I love that, and also love the newest one. My mouth fell open when I saw the cover of One Breath Away, and just thought they did a beautiful job. Jagged Otter asks, have you ever considered writing a children's or young adult book? I was just asked that the other night, and I would never say never to anything. I would love to write a children's book, especially working with some younger children through the years. I think it'd be really hard. I really admire young adult as well as children book writers because they have to say so much in such a small amount of space, and there's really a unique talent to be able to do that and do that well. So yeah, someday that would really be something I would love to pursue. And Bookworm asked, do you judge a book by its cover? I do. I do. Well, the first thing that catches my eye is the book cover. That's what causes me to pick it up, but I'll always look at the book flap to read more about it. But most definitely, I judge a book by its cover, at least literature books. Passion for Fiction asks, how long does it usually take for you to write a book from beginning to end? For me, it depends, but, typically I would say 9 months to write a book from beginning to end. Sometimes it takes a little longer than that, depending on what's going on in the world around me. But yeah, for me to really get a book written well, 9 months to a year, I would say. Shelley Mead asks, if you weren't an author, what other career would you like to try out? I'm so lucky that I'm doing it. I'm in education. Currently, I'm working with some reading programs and work mostly with teachers right now and love it. So I'm really lucky that I can pursue my love for education as well as writing. As for other professions, I think another dream job of mine would be to work in a bookstore. I mean, what could be better than that, than being surrounded by books all day and being able to talk about books with customers? I think that'd be fabulous. Leslie Kagan asks, how did you handle both good and not so good reviews? Well, I tell you, as a writer and after reading reviews of work, you definitely develop a thicker skin. When I first started out and read some not so positive reviews, it hurt my feelings and it was hard to read. But through the years, as I've done a couple more books, you just learn that not every book is for everyone, and it might pinch at my heart a little bit when somebody's particularly unhappy with what I've written. But I also realize that the positives are out there as well, and that I'm happy with the work, and sometimes that just has to be enough. Let's see. Beach Bum Reads asks, what book could you reread and never get tired of? I reread My Antonia by Willa Cather every single year. I love the way Willa Cather writes, and there's my historical fiction side of me showing again. I just love the way that she develops the characters. The setting almost becomes a character in itself in her book, so that definitely is a go-to book. I also reread the Harry Potter books. I've read those several times when my kids were younger with each of them, and I'll pick one of those up every once in a while again too. Passion for Fiction asks, people always say the book is better than the movie, which I happen to agree with. However, is there any book-to-movie adaptation that you think is either as good as the book or perhaps even better? I can't think of one right off the top of my head. I agree with you that the books always are better. Once in a while, I'll hear someone say, or I'll say, oh, that was pretty close to the book, but definitely the book versions, of course, just seem to do such a great job. So yeah, that's a tough one. I'll have to think some more about that one. Jagged Otter asks, do you have any mentors among published authors? Do you mentor any aspiring or rising authors? Another great question. One author, there's several authors who have been very supportive to me, and I found that my fellow writers are really wonderful and look out for you and very, very supportive and want people to do well. My first, who I'd say was my mentor author, there's a great Iowa author named Donald Harstead. He's written crime novels about a sheriff's deputy set in Iowa, and he actually was a sheriff's deputy in Iowa for many years, and I happened to meet him at a writers' conference, and he was great about sitting down with me and telling me a little bit about the ins and outs of publishing. Because he was in law enforcement, he helped me with my first novel. We met at a restaurant in my hometown, and I'd ask him questions. So, would this really happen if, the bad guy did this? And he'd laugh and say, no, that's not how it would work, but this would be the more realistic way. And, I really credit him and his work in inspiring me to try writing. I had seen an article in the paper about him where it talked about his journey from being a sheriff's deputy to a internationally known writer, and I clipped it out, tucked it in a book, knowing that someday I would give that a try myself. So Donald Harstead, if you haven't read his books, he's a great, great Iowa author, mystery writer. Let's see, do I mentor any aspiring or rising authors? I try to be supportive with all writers, just as people have been with me. I try to give back all that has been given to me by my fellow writers. So I hope that someone can find some use out of my words of wisdom. A Word with Kate asks, where do you like to vacation? I am completely, totally a homebody. My favorite place in the world is right here in this house, and but when I do travel to visit family, my brothers or sisters and my mom and dad always love to do that. I love to fish, which surprises a lot of people, so fishing trips are great. We took a family vacation recently to Florida, which we'd never done that before, and got to go out in the ocean and do some deep sea fishing. So that was incredible as well. So mostly a homebody, but I do like to get out too. Shelley Mead asks, what are some of your favorite TV shows? Do you even have time to watch TV? You seem like a busy lady. I do watch TV. I do have some favorite shows. Most recently, The Closer, which I'm really sad to hear that's coming to an end. My favorite show of probably all time was the Monk series on USA, and I was so sad when Tony Shalhoub and the USA Today folks ended that series. That I just loved that show. So that was probably my favorite. I do have a few that I tend to watch, so yeah, I make time for TV too. Lit Girl asks, have you ever seen someone out in public reading one of your books? And I did once. I was in Madison, Wisconsin, traveling to Madison for the weekend, and I was checking into the hotel, and sure enough, the lady at the counter, the check-in gal, was reading These Things Hidden, and so that was just thrilling for me. That had not happened before, so that was great to see. G. Cotto asks, what's your daily writing routine? Do you have a specific time of day you like to write, or feel like more inspiration comes to you during? I write whenever I can, whether it be early or late or the middle of the day, just whenever my schedule allows. I have to be very disciplined about finding a time, whether that time is at a certain particular point of the day. It rarely happens that way for me, but I do have to make sure I do find that time somewhere in the day. Oh gosh. Beach Bum Reads asks, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why? That's really hard. Who would I have dinner with? I don't know. I have to think about that one. I would love, well, Laura Ingalls Wilder would be great, and since I grew up loving her books, that would be wonderful. Um, yeah, I guess I would love to be able to do what I never did as a child with my grandparents, even, being, sitting down with them and asking them about their history and their lives. So yeah, if I could have dinner now with my grandparents who are all deceased, to learn about their lives and learn about what my parents were like as youngsters, I think that would be great too. Jerry asks, my favorite part as a reader is to try to visualize what each character would look like in comparison to someone I know, either know personally or a celebrity. As a writer, do you ever do this? I do. I most definitely do. I try to clearly develop in my own mind what a character looks like and sounds like and moves like. They may not necessarily, I may not put all that information in the book, because sometimes you want the reader to make their own connections. But for me, when I'm writing, I have to have a clear picture of what that character looks like, sounds like. Rosemary Sim asks, Heather, do you like to autograph your books when you are out and about? I do. I'm not always the most comfortable with attention. I'm kind of a quiet, shyer person in that sense, but I'm always willing and happy to sign a book if someone asks me to, and yeah, I love collecting books that have autographs as well, so I'm happy to do that for others. Mike Malley asks, have you ever been recognized or approached by a stranger because of your books? If so, what did you think of it? It doesn't happen very often for me. I don't travel a whole lot. I live in a community that isn't particularly small, but not particularly big. But I was at the eye doctor with a few of my kids yesterday, and one of the patrons there asked me if I was the Heather who wrote the books, and I said yes. So it does happen. It does not happen very often, but it's always nice to be known for the work that you do. Jerry asks, if you had the chance to have dinner with any author, who would it be and why? Oh gosh, there's so many. Sandra Dallas, Elizabeth Berg, I got a chance to meet with her but not have dinner with her, I think would be great. I would love to visit with Louise Erdrich. There are just so many. Anita Shreve, and then, so many more. Ann Patchett, I think, would be great, just to be able to talk to other writers about their craft and what they do and who they are as people. I think that would be fabulous. G. Cotto asks, also, do you have any events coming up in your area? I do. Tonight in Dubuque at the Carnegie Stout Public Library, I am traveling there this evening for a book event at our library. This weekend I'll be in the Des Moines area, Des Moines, Iowa, at the Barnes & Noble and University, as well as the Urbandale Public Library. I love traveling to libraries. I love talking with book clubs, so whenever I get the chance and my schedule allows, I enjoy doing that. And it looks like we're about to announce the winners. 10 lucky winners will snag a copy of One Breath Away. So that's exciting. And the winners are Mike Maley, Audrey L. Curley, G. Gatto, Edie Motley Walworth, Margie Takala, Quincelo Carpenter, Beach Bum Reeds, Rosemary Sim, Desmond Warzel, and Bonnie Colbert. If you are one of our lucky winners, please email livechat@booktrib.com with your mailing address to claim your prize. So great, congratulations to all those winners. Thank you so much for taking time today to visit with me. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact me on my website at heathergudenkauf.com and email me there. And thank you so much. Happy reading.